Hi, welcome to the January 12th, 2021 Club Cubase Google Hangout. We'll get started here in just a few moments. I will go ahead and get I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure that's working as expected. Hi, welcome. Okay, so it sounds like it's going okay. All right, so my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the Hangout today. How the Hangouts work, if you haven't been on one before, is you could send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could just simply ask the questions directly in the live chat field. We'll try to go through these questions in order. Once in a while, I may lose my chat field, may refresh. I may lose some questions. So I apologize in advance for that, but we'll try to go through as many as completely and succinctly as possible in the order that they were asked. Sometimes if you ask your question with, I'm running Cubase Pro 11 on Windows 10, or I'm running Cubase Artist on, Mac OS, that information could be helpful, which operating system, which version that you're running. If we could try to, since the ability to post questions will far exceed my ability to answer them in a timely manner, I will try to get through as many questions as possible. But if you ask your question over and over and over again because it's not getting immediately answered, at that point, that's only going to slow everything down for everyone. So if we could try to refrain from that, it would be appreciated. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area, so in Alexandria, Virginia. Like many of you, during the pandemic time, my family is home, so I may have to take a quick break and help my son when he finishes with his virtual school in a couple hours. And you may hear my wife above me as she's working, so I'll apologize for any interruptions in advance for that. I'm sure many people have similar circumstances. And if you want to, if you're watching this live, feel free to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and if you are attending your first Hangout, let us know that as well. If you're watching this on a replay, you may want to skip ahead a few minutes, and we'll do some quick introductions for a couple minutes, and then we will go ahead and get started. So, all right. Let's see who is on. Okay. So we see Jay from Connecticut. Good to see Jay. See a couple questions. All right. Okay, so we see Tanmay in a Hangout. We have Stephen Butler from Manchester, England. We have Uno from Finland. Jazz Dude is Germany. We have Cupertino, California. Rotterdam, Holland. I've been there. Okay, so we see Sir Robert from Atlanta and Robbie Bowling, both loyal Cubase Hangout attendees, and when we do seminars in person. We see Jan, who is kind enough to do the CubaseIndex.com, so if you want to search for questions that have been covered in the Hangouts, you could search there. All right, so we see John Costigan from Kenosha. So we have Norway, Nova Scotia. Okay. All right, so we have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, so we have Chance 2020, or 320s from Berkshire. All right. All right, so we see Lee Cornwell, first Hangout. You do Cubase. Why should I buy it? I think that you'll find that Cubase is going to be the most comprehensive way to compose music, record music on any program for any workflow. All right, so we see Pro Wash DFW from Texas. We have Bedfordshire in the UK. We have Ireland. first Hangout attendee, Martin. All right. We have Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. Good to see you. All right. Good to see Glenn from Suffolk, a fellow Virginian. All right. We have Belgium. We have Holland. All right. Good to see Terry Dean on a Hangout. Okay. All right. So we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with some questions. So question, am I right in saying that you cannot isolate MIDI tracks in job queuing for export audio mixdown? I was hoping this feature would help stemming, but it favors instrument audio and stacks only. I was hoping I could queue stereo out collections as jobs. I would choose my MIDI tracks that would make up one particular stem, export making my stem, and queue this job for each stem. Not possible. So what I would probably do as an approach for this is, if you're working, with different MIDI tracks and you want to kind of take advantage and do stems, is I would utilize kind of doing, multiple tracks and have a template set up. So this is how most people tend to work. And then have those stems that you want to be created based upon a template. So let's just take a look at this particular project here. So if I wanted to take these particular, let's say my string here, I could say, let's add a group channel to this, and we'll call this our strings group. We could call this our winds group. So I'll just add in a group channel to the selected channel. So here we'll just call this winds. And you could do this for synths, brass, whatever you want. And then when you go to do an export audio mixdown, you'll have if you kind of scroll down, you could just now export based upon your group channels that you're going to have. So you could just say, okay, I wanted to export my group channels. So I could just say, let's just export my strings and my winds. And if we do that as a multi, we could, and choose to, after the export, we could just create audio tracks that would automatically place the stems directly in. So I'm not sure if that's how you have your template set up or the routing, but that's a pretty common thing. And we could just come over here and just route any of the audio sources from MIDI or instrument tracks or just from virtual instruments directly into groups. And then those groups can be addressable directly from within the export audio mixdown. Okay, so we have a question from Jay from Connecticut. I finally comprehend some color options with my poor color vision. It's easier to see, except some text shifted to colors beyond my ability. How do we change the text color? So I'm not sure if you went into like preferences and then went into color schemes. If you've kind of done this, if this is where you're going, Jay, with that. So let's say if we go to, your default color schemes here. So I'm not sure if the text is going to be independently colored. So you may want to see if possible, if you could let me know where you changed the, if there's text on particular areas, and if, but I'm not sure if the text may be just kind of globally set, but if you could let me know if there's a particular area with the text that you're not seeing. But I don't know of a way to, we could see kind of the focus area, cycle ranges, ruler background, for different types of functions here. So that may be, so I'm not sure, let's say if there's one just for text, but if you could let me know exactly what text that you want to see and how you affected the color schemes, I might be able to kind of dig into it a little more. Okay. Okay, so question, can I assign MIDI controller knobs to macros found in key commands? So let's take a look at that. So if I wanted to control, let's say I go to my studio setup, I'll go to like a generic remote. And let's say if I just wanted to move, just grab a knob on my controller. So I'll just click on learn. I'm going to move a knob. We see that this is going to be controller 32. So let's go over here to command. And then I think you may see macro. So I'm going to say hide selected tracks. So I hit OK. So we go under device to macro and then hide selected tracks. So let's say if I have this track selected, I move the knob and that will automatically hide it. So once again, go to studio setup. You want to configure the generic remote so that we could say, okay, fader 1, this is our incoming MIDI message. And what we want it to do is under device, select command, go to under channel category, select macro, and then you could just trigger your macro directly from there. Okay. So, and we have a follow-up question with this. Also, how can I assign my controller knobs to macros found in Inspector when I change plugins? So if you wanted to control macros, you could do it through the generic remote like that. So when you say macros found in Inspector when I change plugins, so, if you wanted to, let's say if we have a particular plugin on this, let's say if I have an audio track, and we could go to quick control, so you could have these 8 controllers kind of set up as like configured, kind of going into the same area. We go to studio, and then you could go to your track quick controls. So we could say, okay, it's going to be, and I'll just do, let's say, do a learn. So let's say if I come here, I can now just kind of adjust and set up like 8 sliders, and I'm just using like a Nectar panorama keyboard. And if I have an insert on this particular track for like a plugin or VST instrument, I could just come directly over here. Let me just drop a quick plugin in and say I just want it to go to Squasher. And then as I wanted to go to particular parameters of effects, let's say I wanted to do the drive, I could go to my quick controls and just click on learn. And now my first quick control will just automatically adjust the drive here. So you could just control that directly here with your remote control. So anything that you wanted to control with the controller, you could just, right click on it and add it to a quick control slot, or you could just learn the parameters. So let's say we go to quick control 2, you click on the slot, click on the learn, that will automatically put that parameter into that slot. And then you're able to automatically have control of that through your MIDI controller. So, but I'm not sure when you say macros found in your inspector, what that means, because macros really aren't in the inspector, but if you wanted to control parameters, you could give that a try. Okay, let's go through. All right. Just see a comment, currently working on a project with 200 plus tracks in Cubase 11. Couldn't be happier. That's great. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so we have a question. What does move past post fader when right clicking insert plugins means, and because doing that crashes Cubase? So let's say, okay, so for each of the inserts, you could have let's see where you're at. So let's say if I just wanted to, so you have for the inserts pre and post fader slots. So I'm going to choose to move this to, so I'm going to take this squasher plugin and let's move to post fader slot. And now it's automatically moved that to one of the post fader slots. And that determines if the gain structure of the fader itself has an effect of kind of the gain on the particular insert or effect. So, and as you can see in my system, if it's crashing your system, I don't know, not sure if it's with a particular plugin that does that, but didn't have any problems on mine. So this way you could adjust the amount of the gain going into the plugin, just kind of using the basis of the fader. So as you could, if you don't want that to be in effect, you could just simply adjust accordingly. Okay, so we have a question. This is kind of follow up from Tanmay as well. What does post fader and pre fader mean? What does it do? When should I use one, and how is it useful? So let's say if I have, let me just find. Okay, so say if we want to do this for like an insert. Okay, so let's say if I'm here on this particular track and I wanted to add a reverb. So let's say I now have so right now we have this set to post fader. So the effect, as I adjust the gain structure here, it's not really feeding the effect, but if I switch it to pre-fader, the gain structure of the reverb is kind of the same regardless of the fader position. But when you have post fader, the post fader is going to, determine how much of that signal is being fed into the send or into the insert based upon the fader position. But when we go to pre-fader, this has no effect on the fader's amount of gain going into the insert or to the send. Okay, so let's see. All right, so glad to see a couple people on their first Hangouts. So it's always great. Okay. All right, so we have James Sullivan from the Wide Boys here in the UK. He says, I'm part of the Steinberg Artist Program. Congratulations, great to have you on the Hangout. All right. So we have Danny Ketting from NorCal wondering how to do comping without adding new tracks, vocals and guitar, etc. All right, so let's take a look at comping. I think I have an example project here. Okay, so if I wanted to comp just a little section of audio, I could set up my comp between, like, let's say the left and right locators. And if I wanted to record over and over again to create a comp, kind of taking the best performance of all the different takes, I could come over here and I'm just going to record, and then it's going to just record take 2, take 3, take 4, take 5, 6, and 7. So now they're all on the same track. And when we see kind of this little shading when the parts are selected, that indicates that there's parts that are kind of stacked underneath. Now you have this little icon here called show lanes. And if you don't see that, you could right click and go to your track control settings and then just make sure that, you know, your lanes are visible. So I believe they're visible by default. And now when you click on show lanes, at this point, you can see all the different recordings. So they're all on the same track, but they're kind of subset of recordings. And we could edit these. So let me just kind of show you here quickly. So say if I have like a recording, and if I wanted to create a composite or take little parts of each of these different performances, we could grab the little hand tool. And this is a specific comping tool. So I could select just a range. And if you wanted to listen, you could just grab your control or command. And say, that's the best one. Okay, from here to here. You can say, I really like this particular, let's say I like these particular takes of all these different performances. So now, instead of, you know, having to, you know, take different tracks of recordings, they're all on the same track, all sharing the same EQs, effects, and inserts. And all you have to do is, once you click here, this would be kind of the result of all the edits, but you could use kind of the lanes to do the editing and select the best parts of other parts. And at that point, just say, there's your comp take. All right, so we see Scott Nipper, says first time here, not new to Cubase, from Folsom, California. Welcome to the Hangout. All right, so we have Menum Sean from Bangladesh. Welcome. Good to see you on Hangout. Okay, so a question. And if you have learned something new, or if you like the Hangouts, make sure that you have subscribed to the channel, and also that you hit the like button throughout the Hangout. So every time you learn something new, if you want to hit the like button, I guess you can only hit it once, right? But if you do learn something new, make sure you do that. It helps us to continue to do these Hangouts. All right, so question, Cubase 10.5, Windows 10. I regularly track vocals over a pre-recorded backing track. How best to accurately paste them elsewhere in the track? Okay, so if you have, let's say, we just go to like a different project here. So I guess if you wanted to take, you know, vocals from one part to another, you know, there's a couple different ways to approach it. So let's say if I have, I'll just kind of drag in a couple of vocal samples here quickly, and this will be incredibly musically inappropriate. Okay, so let's say I just done a recording like this, you know, and let's say, you know, as you're kind of working with it, and let's say we have our vocal, it comes in here.
I really want the best for you.
All right. So, and at this point, if you wanted to just paste, you could just hold down like Alt or Option and drag. And, you know, so that will allow you to copy. So, or you could just, you know, come over here and just do Control or Command C, select the event, move the playhead cursor, and this will be the basis for where it's going to paste, and hit Control or Command V. That will paste. You could also just kind of, you know, zoom in and move. Now, if you notice that as I move, that we may want it to, it's kind of snapping to the grid. And if you want to bypass that, you can hit the letter J or click on this icon. And now you can kind of freely place your different components. And now we could freely place that. Some people will also get into where you could see, like, you know, your different snap points. So if you wanted to, you know, activate, you know, like snap points, you know, one of the things that you could do is, let me just find the icon here really quickly. All right, so but you could have, you know, different snap points. Let me just see if I could remember. I'm just kind of blanking on it, but this way you could say, I want, you know, to snap this particular area to it. And it's usually just, let me just see if I go into my definition view. So generally by default, it will snap to the beginning of the file. So let's say if I just double click here, and just one little icon. Okay, so when you click on this icon here, so if you want, like, you know, this particular word to be kind of the downbeat, or let's say even if it's a pickup note, you can now turn on, you know, the snap, and we see this line here. So it'll, instead of synchronizing that to the event, we can now just move that snap point. And that snap point will just automatically be the one that syncs to the beat. So those are a couple ways, but it's really just kind of, you know, standard cut, copy, paste. If you wanted to take just kind of even a portion of that, you know, you could also just hold down Alt, Option, and or Control Command together, and you could slide the audio within the event if you need to kind of reposition stuff. So, okay. All right, so we see someone checking in from Miami. All right, so we have Colombia. That's great. All right, Belgium and Holland. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me, so bear with me while I get to where I was. Okay, so we had a question, and Dan's on Hangout. Says, I emailed you about the Spitfire Discovery template creation. So let me see if I could find this. I think I copied it in. Okay, so I think, yeah, so the question is, could you please show creation of the Spitfire BBC Discover Orchestra template? I downloaded the template from Spitfire, and I don't know why there are two templates, one for single instance and the other for multi-instance. So I don't have, and I think I replied by email. So I think when you have a single instance versus a multi-instance, a lot of times this could be like if we have a project and we have an instrument kind of like Hallian Sonic or Hallian Sonic SE or Hallian, and I believe that Spitfire uses the Contact library. So this one particular instrument of Hallian Sonic SE, Hallian Sonic, or Hallian could even run, you know, like Hallian Sonic SE and Hallian Sonic 3 can run 16 different sounds within it. So if I'm here, I can say MIDI channel 1, I have this patch, MIDI channel 2, I have this patch, etc. And I could say, okay, when we go to MIDI channel 4, we have this patch. So we could, I think when it says multi-instance, that maybe you have one instrument that has multiple patches, multiple sounds loaded up in it. So, and that's nice because you could actually come here, select the different sounds and be able to edit kind of as you would expect to edit, you know. So if you wanted to just say, okay, I'm here, now I could control, you know, from my Skylab instrument or my orchestral sounds. So this could be your flute, you know, and now you're looking at your oboe, violin 1, whatever. So and the other one, I think, would have one instrument with one sound in it. So in this instance, it may have 3 separate instruments with one sound. Now, why is there a difference? Because most instruments won't utilize multi-cores. So if you have multi-processor in your computer, let's say you have an 8-core processor, most plugins, if you're on one single instance of a plugin, will only utilize one processor core. So whereas if you wanted to take 16 instruments, and if you put them all in one instrument, that's going to use one core of, let's say, an 8-core system. But if you have 16 separate instances, each utilizing one sound, that way those, you know, 2 of those will be shared per core, roughly. So it really could depend upon the playback engine and your CPU setup. So that's probably why they do it both ways. Some people will go, okay, I could run everything I need, you know, in a multiple instance, and they like to have everything in one particular window to do all of their editing. So, and that's fine. If you start running into thousands and thousands of tracks, then, you know, that's when utilizing a multi-core system and optimizing the multi-core usage can make more sense for you. Okay. All right, seeing kudos for Jan for his CubaseIndex.com site from other users. So we'll give him a shout out for that. We appreciate his efforts. All right, so we have, hi, could you tell me how to delete VSTs from the manager? Thanks, Michael from Liverpool, England. I hope to go there one day. So let's go to our VST plugin manager. So I think you could just, you know, if you don't want to see particular plugins, that you could select. And at this point, so let's say if I wanted to get rid of a particular plugin, that you could just select it. Let's see if we want to go to this. Let me just reread a question, make sure. Now, so what you could do is, Okay, so you could choose to remove the unavailable plugins. You could make a new, you could make a new copy the current collection of plugins. So let's call it Jan 12th. And just at this point, you could choose to delete just by right clicking within your plugin collection and they won't show up. So I'm not sure if you just want to make sure that the plugin isn't visible, you could just kind of right click on the right hand side within the VST plugin collection. But you might, let's see if we do our default, if we could. Yeah, so if you just duplicate the plugins, so you could say new collection, you could say copy the current collection, and then you could just simply right click from this, and then you could remove plugins just by right clicking and deleting on it. And I think the reason, just as a safety mechanism, won't allow you to delete it from the default, so that you could always go back if needed. All right. So we have 5477 Pearly White checking in from Sweden. All right. And we have the Tuba Guy. Good to see you again from Switzerland. Okay. We see hopefully Absolute 5 will be available soon. I haven't heard anything on that, but I could check out, see if I could get some more information. All right. So we see Pablo on a Hangout. Good job. Good to see Kyle Kennedy on a Hangout. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, show how you set up your colors on the tracks on the mixer, please. Thanks, Greg. You rock. I think this is just a feature that rocks, so I won't take credit for it. But if you wanted to see your mix console faders, I'll just open up a different project to show this a little better. Okay, and I'm just going to hide my input channels. All right, so if I wanted my mixer to kind of automatically be scaled, colorized through the mixer, you would just go to Preferences, and then go to User Interface, and you would see Mixed Console. You see the track and Mixed Console and channel colors. And what you want to do is just make sure that you have Mixed Console channels. So without, that's when it's unchecked. And now if you want it to be checked, and once again, this is under Preferences, User Interface, Track, and Mixed Console channel colors. Just go directly there, and you could adjust their intensity and color strength as well. So if you wanted to be, more, you could do that, or just return it to your default state. So I think by default it'll be turned off, and now you could just have a more demure color scheme for that. So that's how you could colorize the mixed console channels, and I think that came in 10.5. All right, good to see Douglas Emerson on a Hangout. He's here for tips, family, and users. That's good. Okay, so a question. Please explain the concept of reamping bass and guitar in Cubase 10.5 and UR44 similar. As I understand, it should be possible to do this without a reamping box. So really all you have to do, is, let's say if we have a guitar part here. So let's say we'll take this guitar and I wanted to reamp it. So, often what people do is just record the guitars. So say if I come here, and we wanted something let's say we recorded just the dry guitar without, straight, we hooked up a DI box from the guitar. We explained to guitar players it's not going to affect their tone, that it's just for impedance issues in the studio so they won't get paranoid. So if we have a dry guitar, we wanted to reamp it, all we would have to do is send this signal out. So if you have a UR44, you have, 4 analog outputs. And what you would do is just go to your audio connections and let's just go to an output. And I will just add a mono bus and we'll call this, sorry for hitting the mic, we're just going to call this 2 amp. Okay, so at this point, what I want to do is to take this particular guitar track and instead of sending it to my, so we'll take this and instead of sending it to my stereo out, what I want to do is to send it to the amp. So that signal is now going to be connected directly into the guitar amp. And then what you do is you put a microphone on the amp. And at this point, you could choose to add an audio track and you want to just simply say, okay, this is where my microphone is going in, and then hit record. So sometimes you may have to play with the gain structure because the signal level coming out of the guitar, coming out of the guitar versus coming out of your audio interface may be different depending on the pickups and how hot the pickups are. So you may have to adjust the gain structure of the signal going out, but that's the basic concept. So some people will get a box just to kind of, to match the gain. But if you're kind of careful with it, you should be able, it's done all the time with people without issue. So. Okay. All right, so just see next question from Tanmay, added to, and then I can't see what it is. Looks like an icon. Okay, as insert an empty insert slot. By the way, does this affect the signal chain? Meaning, does the empty slot in between make the signal processing longer? Or, okay, so it looks like, okay, so I think I get what the question is. So let's say if we add, so if we have 2 inserts here, so let's say if I put a compressor and let's say an EQ, so let's say I have these. Okay, so if we have 2 inserts, I think if there's an empty slot in between, make the signal processing longer, or if there, so is this a different timing for the processing than this because of the empty slot, I believe is the question. So if adding, having nothing in between, like a blank insert slot, does that add any latency? It will not add any latency, so you won't have any difference between those two. So you see, hi Greg, is it possible to batch rename events with the counter in Cubase or Nuendo? So I think we could do it in Nuendo. Let's take a quick look because there's specific, but I'll just take a look here in Cubase as well. Let's say if we go to, so this is where one of the things Nuendo I think has. Okay, so I'll just open it up in Nuendo quickly. Thanks for all the great questions. Just open up a quick project here. Okay, so I think if we go to our pool window that we go to the audio that we're going to have edit, rename objects. So if I wanted to come here and rename the object, so just right clicking in the pool window. So we'll just, again, come over here, edit, rename object. So we can say original name, and then at this point, you could say, okay, we have original name. We could do prefixes. We could say we wanted to add a number, and we could do start number, and then automatically increment or decrement numbers based on that. So that's kind of a Nuendo feature, not really found in Cubase. Again, go to your media bay, not media bay rather, but the pool window for the project. And you could select a number of files here and go to edit, rename objects. And then you could, insert, the project, time, date, numbers, and different attributes directly there. So. Okay, so I'll just exit out Nuendo. All right, so we have a question. Project logical edit to select only bass notes or a range of notes in key editor. So we could do this directly. Just open up a quick MIDI part. Bear with me just for a second. Okay, so just jump over here. So, if you want to select, it's not a project logical editor, but rather just the MIDI editor. So let's say if we have parts here and I wanted to select all notes below, let's say G3 and lower for this particular parts. So I could just kind of take all these different parts here. So let's go to our MIDI and go to logical editor. And what we want to do under function is to select, and we're going to say type is equal to notes. And we're going to say value 1, which is the pitch, is going to be, let's say, or I'll just do it from the top here. So we'll say, and value 1 is going to be less than, let's say, G3. So all I have to do now is, as I come here, I'll just say apply, and then it will select everything less. I'll just change this to less or equal than. So that's the way we'll say select every MIDI note whose pitch is less or equal than G3. So now I hit select and then hit apply, and then that's how you could do it just like that. So that's how you could set up a MIDI logical editor just for selecting low notes or notes within a defined range. All right, so Michael Teams wants everyone to slap the like button. So okay, so I see question, when I load, I get a second control bar. Any way to get rid of that? From opening? So it's probably a project that was saved, and I assume with the control bar that you mean it's going to just open up another transport panel, maybe something like this. So if you run into that, it's probably a project that was saved in 9.5 or earlier. So you could just hit the F2 key and then just save again, but just the F2 key will do that. So, there was a floating transport window. So you have that, and this migrated to kind of being fixed at the bottom. So at that point, you could just hit the F2 key or just go to transport panel. And then if you save, that should be fine. But if you start with some of the earlier templates that have been in for a long time, so let's say I just wanted to go to, acoustic guitar and vocal. Here's a template that was created and is migrated from an earlier version. So we do this, you may have, as we can see, just a floating transport. So just you go to transport menu, hit F2, transport, and uncheck transport panel, or just simply resave that. So all right, so we see CJ from Las Vegas. He was indicating he's a little late. So I won't tell the teacher that you were late for Club Cubase class. So all right. How can I split frequencies using the new Imager plugin or any native multiband plugin and send them to a different fader so I can start mixing each band separately with different effects? So, currently it's not really so set up for that. What you could do is, let's say if we have just a portion of the audio here, so let's say we have a piano part. Just activate this quickly. One way to accomplish this is just using kind of a render in place. So let's say if I go to my inserts and I want to come to, let's say, my multi-band compressor. So I'll just say, okay, let's go to my multi-band compressor. And I just wanted to solo. And let's say I just want to solo just these two ranges. So if I wanted to just solo, let's say just this particular range here. I'm just going to set like the letter P here quickly, and then I'll just have that, and I will choose to do a render in place from the edit menu. So let's go to my render settings, and I want to, I don't want to mute this. Let's say you could choose to mute the source events or not. I'll keep them unchanged, and let's keep our channel settings, and I'll just say render. And once you've done this, only this track will play back. That's just the low frequencies. So there isn't a way to say, take this and route it. But if you just solo, route it to a new fader. But you could just solo the band. And then this is just the low end that's playing directly from that. So I'll just go to my control room. So that's just the low frequencies from the piano that have been isolated. And that, of course, since it's on a new channel, is on its own fader as well. That's completely independent. So that's a pretty painless way to accomplish that task. Okay, so a question from Tanmay: how to use the Quantize panel, and can you explain it in details? I come from a different DAW, so let's take a look. And what does Audio Warp Quantize and Top Quantize panel do? Can you demonstrate both? So let's take a look and see. We might have some parts that we could quantize here. All right, so let's look at our violin. This might be pretty quantized, isn't it? Not so. All right, so let's say I wanted to quantize. All right, so let's say I have this part here. And I just wanted to, quantize some. So right now this will be set. So we'll open up our quantize panel, and we can do that just by kind of clicking here. So we could choose our different. So if I want this to, be straight quarter notes, I'll just say quantize. And if I wanted this to be probably for this part rhythmically, I would choose eighth notes, and we could choose to quantize. And now we can see that the notes that were kind of, maybe a little early or a little late, even though this is pretty tight. So when I hit quantize here, you could just choose to, that will nudge the events kind of based upon the rhythmic value here. So you think of the rhythmic value that you want to apply is going to be set for the smallest rhythmic value. So if you have like eighth notes and quarter notes and half notes and whole notes, you'd probably want to just quantize just the eighth notes. Set the value to eighth notes. Or if you just quantize, like often what I do is kind of spot correction. Now you could also choose to do different tuplets. So if you say, I want to do quintuplets, so this would give you 5 divisions, or septuplets, like 7 divisions within a beat. You could have different tuplet figures here. And we also have like how many ticks. So if we're like, this is really fine for feel, it's like, yes, when we look at it, it's off, but when you listen to it, it's not. So at that point, you may want to have just like rough, like just an idea of, how much that you don't want it to be affected. So when we kind of look over here, you could also adjust, the safe range. You could adjust kind of a swing percentage. So let's say if we're here, we can say, okay, let's just make it swing, and I'll just say we'll do. So you may not hear it so much, but if you have like different drum grooves, you could apply swing functions here. Now you could also just kind of get these, handled directly from the panel here. So at this point, you could choose to, do the quantize information here. And, within this, you could also quantize the lengths. So if you want the lengths or the ends of notes to be quantized. So if you want this to always last, where you say, okay, my quantize value I want it to be the eighth notes, and let's quantize the ends. So that will go directly to the ends or the lengths of the notes, so that it will go to the nearest value directly there. And as you do quantizing, one of the things that's real important is as we just kind of do, let's say if I have just a quick, and I wanted to do recording, you could actually record with the quantize kind of enabled. So let's say I'll just come here to this violin part, and I want to just enable AQ here. And this will allow you to record with quantizing on. So let's say if I'm here and I have my click track, and I just go. So now when I go to play it back and we look at the part, it's going to actually apply the quantization to the event on input. So now I just played a bunch of just. And we could just have that kind of quantize. And let's say if I'll just do that without the swing. So now if I want to just, let's say I'll just play in just a bunch of random notes quickly. So now when we play it back, we could just have. So that would quantize. And if I wanted to undo the quantize, so even though I've quantized the input of it so that everything is now kind of, perfectly on the grid, if I wanted to, I could go to edit and we go to advanced quantize. And at this point, we could just say, when we do this, let's go to advanced quantize. And I could, we could just, undo that quantizing as well. So I think if we come, let's say, to our quantize panel again, that you could just basically reset the quantize. So that's kind of what I played in. But you could choose to just reset that particular quantizing. So when I do, let's say, a quantizing to 16th notes now, that it will quantize the original data and not the data that's been quantized on input. Now, another form of quantization that people often miss is what we call the, sometimes it's called soft quantize or iterative quantizing. So at this point, we could say we only want notes that fall, if this note was slightly off grid. So let's say I just disabled snap here, and as we want to select this, I could say, okay, let's apply a quantize. It's going to move it, 90% closer to the note, closer to the grid rather. So every time I do this, it'll just keep moving it ever so slightly, but not so mechanically directly done. So you could do that for your quantize options as well. Now, if we're dealing with audio that's been, let's say, recorded, we could apply these same things, but this is when you need to have like the audio warp and when you have like the tempo detection that's already been kind of done. So if I wanted to take, let's say a drum loop over, so let's say, okay, so let's say if I have this, and now what I could do is just kind of select this, and let's say we go to our quantize options, and if I have the audio warp, I could say, okay, I want this to be quantized more towards eighth notes, and you could just alter the feel of your different quantize options there. Now, if you wanted to actually extract the groove of a particular file, what you could do is from the hit points, you have your quantize panel here. So let's say if I open my quantize panel up again, and if I have like a particular MIDI part that I like the feel of, I could choose to drag that MIDI part directly to the quantize settings, and that will be saved as a preset. And in regards to different drums, if I have audio rather, I could choose to, again, just select go to my hit points. And from the hit points here in the sample editor, so I'll just double click and we'll go to hit points. And here I could choose to create groove, and that would add that particular groove directly in as a quantized preset. So I could quantize my Midi or other audio parts to that particular feel that I've extracted. So hopefully that helps, Tanmay, but if you have more questions, let me know. Okay. All right, my chat field jumped on me, so bear with me while I get back. Okay, just finding my spot. Okay, so I just see a question from Tim Weinheimer. I was thinking about getting the Yamaha WX5 Wind controller. Does it integrate easily into Cubase? So basically what it's going to do is, it's going to record the MIDI notes that are transmitted directly from the WX5, and, where you're going to get kind of the subtle nuances. So you'll see kind of your MIDI notes as you expect here as you play it in, but it's also going to just transmit breath control data. So you'll be able to just go to, and you'll see probably a lot of CC2, and that's kind of what's going to give you the subtle nuance and the kind of phrasing that you would like to expect from kind of like a saxophone or a wind instrument. Kind of the normal expressiveness can be utilized from breath control. So basically it's just, going to transmit MIDI notes and probably breath control, may do some pitch bend information. I haven't worked with one in a long time, but that's really all you need to do. So it'll, integrate into Cubase just like any other MIDI controller quite easily. All right, so we have a question. Can I still watch this later? So yeah, it'll be available to watch after the Hangout. All right, so just see a question. What is the Steinberg Artist Program? So the Steinberg Artist Program is some of our high-profile users. You could reach out to Steinberg in Germany, and, they could, utilize kind of and develop a relationship for marketing collateral. And we could take, context and comments from artists. And, so we could often it's kind of a professional relationship between kind of high profile artists and the company. So a lot of companies have that. So, and we have often some of our artists on the Hangouts. We've had guys from Maroon 5 on the Hangouts and other people. So all sorts of cool people that will sneak into the Hangouts and kind of have a low profile. Okay, so I see from Jay, so it says, yes, default colors is where I was, some same preference section you were at, and it changed to, my girl says, a deep red burgundy. It is in places like audio connections, control room speakers. So let's see if I have this here, and I will go ahead and try to adjust the preferences. Try to see if I see in the color schemes. Maybe if I adjust a focus color. So I don't see any areas for like the text. But if you could, Jay, if you could let me know if you're running Mac or PC, that could be helpful, because there could also be within, if you're running in dark mode in the particular operating systems, might make a difference as well. You might play into that. So we see hello from Lawrence, hello from Rhode Island. Is there a way to make the mixer window show only the group members when a group is selected, like a spill function on a digital mixer? It's not set up exactly like that, but we could show, some of the control surfaces do that. But let's say if I wanted to, I think we'll have some different groups here. Okay, so let's say if I have, I'll just make a drum group. Okay, so let's say I have my drum group here. One of the things that you can do, if you're in the group, you'll see kind of at the top, and here you could see the sources. So it's not like a spill function like a digital mixer, but if you go to your drum group, you can say, oh, in the drum group is all of these different ones, all of these different sources. So you could say, I'm on this particular track, this is feeding my drum bus. So I could now go directly to my group channel. I could just say, let's take that. Let's go to this group is going to, my send. So if I want to go to descend, or now I wanted to see all the different tracks that are feeding the sends, I could just select those. So my snare top track is going to 2 targets, and I could choose that I want to go to my drum group. So you could kind of navigate here quickly. It's, so it may not be exactly like a spill function, but you could quickly navigate, on any of the tracks. It's kind of a feature a lot of people miss. So you can say at the very top, this is feeding to, and I can say to my drums, and my drum group is now feeding to my stereo out. And I can say all these different sources are feeding my drums. And so you could kind of navigate pretty easily directly from that as well. But it's not going to hide everything else in the particular mixer for you. All right. Hey, Greg, thanks for the shout. Is there a way to recalibrate the horizontal zoom after deleting parts from the timeline? There seems to be lots of dead space that remains within the project. All right. So let's just do a new project and see if we could recreate this. Okay, so I'll just throw some audio files in. All right, so I'm just gonna. So let's say this is our project. So I've seen some people, and if you go to the project setup. So a lot of times projects may be set for like 20-minute duration. I've seen some people that have it set for like an hour. And then, when they go to zoom in, that it might, be to the point where it's like, okay, now I'm zooming in forever. I'll just do maybe even more of an extreme example. So go to your project setup and let's say 10 hours. So and a lot of times when you have like all this leftover time on events, and sometimes if you have it like 10 hours, you may not be able to zoom down to the sample level as much. So I would try setting the project duration to roughly what the project is set to, and see if that will make a difference for you. I remember working with it was Eric Johnson's engineer at the time, and he had his project set for 24 hours, and I'm not sure why, for one song, and then he's like, I can't zoom in, and it seems like the project's really sluggish, and so I just went into his project setup, and then he had it set for 24 hours for the project, and once he set it to like 20 minutes or something more reasonable, then everything worked great, and it was a big epiphany moment for him. All right, so give that a try, but I don't think you have to recalibrate anything. All right, good to see Gareth on the Hangout. All right, so is electronic beat production possible in Cubase? Of course. So let's just go to a particular project. So there's a number of ways of doing it. I'll just show you one way. There's dedicated drum programming windows. There's also plugins if you wanted to take that approach. So let's say, I could run a MIDI insert plugin as like a beat designer. So let's say if I wanted to just come right over here. So let's say I'll just play. All right, so let's say. So, if you want to set this to, so if you want to just, and I'm the world's worst programmer, so. And if you wanted to put in some other different sounds. And let me just make sure I have the right drum map for this. So you could do stuff like that kind of all day long. There's also a dedicated drum editor. So if you wanted to just take this particular pattern, I could insert the pattern at the cursor. And if you wanted to double click, you could also see this within a dedicated drum editor that you could draw in different events as well. So a number of different ways of obviously doing electronic beat production inside of Cubase. So. All right, so he said, all right, so we see greetings from Sable Winters from San Francisco, where it's a rainy day. All right, we have a question from Danny. How do I get tracks or projects from Cubase 7.5 into Cubase 11? All you have to do really is just open them up. So the projects from Cubase SX1 will import. So it's 20 years ago. So there's no change in the project file format. So just simply open them. You know, Cubase 7.5 did run 32-bit plugins, and which is not, of that era, and the 32-bit plugins aren't supported in Cubase 11. So the project will open, but maybe not every plugin will open, depending on the plugins that were used. I just see a nice comment from Agent K. Says, responding to the philosopher meditates about the electronic beat productions, and Agent K just says Zed uses Cubase, so that'd be a big yes. So. Okay. All right. So we have Duino DD from Tunisia. We have Vancouver. All right. So we have Tim Ferris from Winchester. Okay. I just see a comment, snap points, awesome, life-changing, thanks so much. Yeah, once you start getting into snap points, it's really cool what you can do with that. It's a big epiphany moment for a lot of people. Hi, Greg. I'm just wondering if I use the bounce selection feature, what will be included in the audio event that is created? For example, fade in, fade out, insert effects, and so on. So I think let's go ahead and we'll take just a quick look here. So let's say if I have a fade out and I do the bounce selection feature, and I'll choose to replace events, and we can see that that is going to be included. So we'll have our fade out that will be rendered if you want to, but it'll do like, if we have portions that are kind of, edited and fades, and also I believe it'll do clip gain automation. So let's say if I want to bring this down, and let's say if I want to do a bounce selection, we could now just do a bounce selection. I think all that would be kind of rendered as expected. So where we had our space, we rendered it as one file. Where we did our clip gain, where we did our fades, those will all be taken into account. If you wanted to include different processing like insert effects, that's when you would do the render in place. So selecting the file, go to render in place, and at that point you could choose to include different functions. So at this point you could say I want it to be dry, I want it with the channel settings, which would be the channel strip, EQs, and inserts. The complete signal path, we could think of it as sends and inserts, channel strip, EQ, sends, and master effects. So if you wanted to include the processing, do a render in place. If you wanted to just kind of, consolidate all of the files that you've done editing on, that's what the bounce selection does. All right, so we see John from Logansport, Indiana. It's great to have you on. All right, so I see bring back hypersonics, I think. So, hypersonic was a great instrument in a day, but I think maybe if you listen to it now, it might not hold up the test of time. And we did that in conjunction with a company called Wizoo that was acquired. So, you could, even though it was a kind of a Steinberg branded product, it was developed by Wizoo. And then Wizoo chose not to continue to support it. So I just see a comment from Tanmay. Says, Agent K, why do mods delete comments automatically that are, for example, posted 5 hours before the hangout? So I don't think it's any moderators that are doing that. Sometimes there is kind of a limit to what YouTube keeps in the comments. So I've seen comments from maybe an hour before that are kept, but I used to kind of open mine up early because a lot of comments that people would just kind of park there previously were automatically deleted. So I don't think it's any moderators that are doing it. It's just kind of how the YouTube Hangouts work for comments. So, and that's why we also have an email address. You could always send an email to. Yeah. And I just see Agent K is indicating it's a automatic YouTube quote unquote feature. All right, good to see Captenergy Music. Okay. All right, so we see Steve Animatrix, late but second time here. Welcome again. My Steinberg USB key arrives today, so I'll literally be able to start using this stuff. We'll have a lot of fun with it. Enjoy and welcome to your Cubase experience. Okay, so a question from Tim Ferris, Cubase Pro 10. Any way to change click destinations, Q1, 2, 3, and mix with volume differences as well? So if you want it to, let's say if we have our control room set up, let's say let's say we have bass, vocals, and drums here, and we're tracking. So let's say all right, so I'll just stop my horrible beat. All right, so let's say if I wanted to take my click drum, or my click track rather. Okay, so we have our click track going directly into our main control room here. Now, if I wanted to take the click and let's say if I wanted the bass and drums to hear it, but not the vocals, we could click on the control room, and if we could say the drummer and bass player want to hear the click, but the vocalist doesn't. So we could turn off and on the click directly there, and we could set kind of the click level for each one of these as well. So if I wanted to go to Q Mix 1, we're now listening to the drummers. And if we wanted to go to, if we were listening to our different Q mixes, like that's our vocalist Q mix, we don't hear the click, but we go to the Q mix where, our drummer and our, we could now just come over here and have the different, independent volume and independent, routing to the different headphone mixes in addition to what you have in the control room. So if that's, Tim, let me know if that's kind of what you want to, if that was your question. If I misunderstood, just let me know. All right. So I see question, is it possible to automate the transpose? All right. So let's just... So I'm not sure if you want to automate it from a controller, but kind of while it's playing, if you wanted to like select the event here. So let's say just... So let's say I'll just make this kind of one nice happy event. So if I wanted to, you could kind of transpose just from the info line there. Another way, and some controllers, MIDI controllers, can assign a knob for that. But let's say if I wanted to also, another method of doing this is just to utilize a transpose track. So now at this point, I could just say, I want this to transpose. So now as we play, it's going to go up one semitone. So start in our kind of root key. Right here, it's going to go up to one semitone. And then it's going to go down 5 semitones. When it gets to here. So that's ways that you could have it, repeatedly do that if you wanted to control that from like a MIDI controller. Let's see if we could set that up maybe in a generic remote. So let's see if we go to command. Yeah, so I don't see it in a generic remote, but if you wanted to kind of repeatedly play back, you could do that, or you could hit the transpose on your MIDI controller, and that would automatically be captured in the notes that you played after hitting the transpose. Should automatically work with that. Okay, so a question, can I ask about Reason Rack in Cubase? How can I use Reason Rack effects on a Cubase track? So if those particular effects within the Reason Rack aren't separate VST effects, I'm not sure if you could use it. And kind of as I mentioned before, I don't have a license of Reason Rack to utilize and check out. So, but it would need to, sometimes, plugins will have their own effects, but those effects within the plugin aren't necessarily plugins that could be accessed. So if you see, so it may only work within the Reason environment. And if that's the case, it's really kind of the design decision of, of the Reason Racks or Reason Rack. All right, so I just see a question from Ali. Greg, how do you come up with repeated questions? So I'm not sure if I understand the question. So let me know if so I'm not sure if it's asking about repeated questions. So maybe if you could re-ask again, Ali. We see from Dolly Smarty, hi, please, how to delete licenses that are no longer valid from my e-licenser. Demo softwares are already installed, but expired licenses still prompt when I launch Cubase 11. So I think There isn't like an official way to do that, but I've seen people like on a Windows platform, I know, go into the e-licenser components and where you could manually delete maybe like old soft e-licenses or some of the other ones. So that might be something to Google, but I'm not sure if it's an official solution. Okay, so I just see a question from Tame. It's kind of directed to Agent K, who does moderation for us. If things get out of control ahead of the time that I get to see it, can you tell me how long before the hangout should I post a question? Because I live in a place where the hangout happens very late, so I might miss one, although I haven't missed one. So I know that, I've seen questions like about an hour in advance, and that those seem to stick within the hangout discussion thread in the comments. So I know that works. I'll see if I could do an experiment for maybe Friday's hangout. Okay. So we see, hello, sir. How to delete effects that I don't want. So if it's if it's on like an audio file. So let's say, if it's like, currently active in a particular project. So let's say if I come here and I have a compressor and I wanted to get rid of that as an insert, you could just kind of drag it away. So if it's instantiated as an insert, you could do that. If it's going to be instantiated as a send effect. So let's say if I come here, and I add a revelation, you could just simply, let's see if we could drag this away. So this is you could delete the actual effect here, remove the selected tracks. If it is within the VST plugin manager, you could, make a copy the current collection, and then you could hide different effects here. I think you could also, if you select the plugin here, you could click on hide. And if you wanted to remove the plugin from your computer, what you could do is just simply uninstall that. So those are different options for different scenarios. Okay, so we have another question from Stephen Butler, if I may. So you could ask as many questions as you want during Hangouts. It's no problem. Does Snap to Zero crossing work on a bunch of marquees, selected events, or single events only? It'll work on whatever events are, whatever events are selected, depending on the function. So if you cut and you want to cut, it's going to be kind of whatever operation, is going to affect the events. If it's a process that affects all the events or selected events, but it could work on multiple events, and it's not limited to just a single event. Okay, so we have a question. What's the best way to make automation adjustments in real time that are going to sync with each bar? Example, real-time adjusting expression, but having that change be applied to the start of the bar. So I guess this is probably with Midi CC as opposed to automation. So let's say if I have, so let's say if I have a Midi track here and double click, and I'll just go to like a larger editor. Okay, so and let's say if I wanted to draw in modulation, and I wanted the modulation to snap to right, so Okay, so so real time adjusting expression, but having that change be applied to the start of a bar. So let's say if I have okay, so let me just see if we could do. Okay, so I'm going to just auto quantize and see if I. All right, so let's see if I go back to this track. Okay, so to make automation. Okay, so let's say if we have, and this would be kind of the same for modulation or expression. So, so if you wanted to always sync at the bar, excuse me. All right, so just. So generally the snap quantize is only going to be for, you know, the quantize on inputs only going to be for notes, but not necessarily CC. So, I mean, you could, like, let's say if you want this to be at 29, you could just type in, like, let's say, okay, I want this to be at measure 28 and start from that specific point in time. And there may be way, let's take a look if we go to, sorry for making everyone dizzy. But if we go to the logical editor, if we could, I think, yeah. So for editing, let's see if we put in just a line tool. And I'll just. So if you want to, if you have the line tool selected here and you have snap turned on, and you can turn on snap just by hitting the letter J. I have my quantize value here set to whole note. And now as I draw in, it's only going to draw in at the particular measure as I do that. So that may be, so if I just, let's say I have nothing there, I could just enter in and it would just kind of draw in my notes, and we could choose to also you know, have that set to just if you want it to be curve or line, so you could do stuff like that as well. So check that out. I think my son may be done with school. Just bear with me just for a minute. All right, I'm back. Sorry about the interruption. All right, so we have a question from Tame. Is there a way to select multiple non-consecutive specific inserts in a channel and copy it to another channel placed far away from the source channel? So I don't think that there's a way to do that I know of, but I'll kind of experiment. So let's say if we come here to our inserts. So let's say if I have this set accordingly. So let's say if I have another plugin, okay, so if I want to only select just try a couple key modifiers. Sorry, I just accidentally quit the program. Let me just see. All right. Just try again here. Sorry about that. All right. So I know that you could, so if we wanted to take like these particular ones and drag it over, that you can just kind of drag and drop and then kind of move that one away. But I don't know of a way to selectively copy different effects over like that. But you could just, if you select from the bottom and drag, and then just take one of them away, you could do stuff like that quite easily as well. All right, so just see a comment from Pablo. They should add more functions to the project logical editor. Could be argued that the functions there are, intimidate a lot of people from using it, but I understand. So, okay. Okay, so I see just a comment, maybe start of a question from Dolly Smarty or Dolly Smarty. Using Vari Audio, is there any W, maybe anyway, but I'm not sure. If there's the rest of the question, we'll see if the rest of the question maybe comes up, but maybe if you could ask the question again. All right, so we see Tame, we answered a question already about the logical editor selecting specific note ranges. All right. All right, so we have a question. How do you use the range tool in the Midi editor? So, the Midi editor itself doesn't have a range tool, and I've kind of argued for it, for the inclusion of a range tool. So let's say if I'm here, so there isn't a range tool in the Midi editor, but what you can do is there's a an in-place editor. I think it's Control Shift I. Let me see if that's the keyboard shortcut. Or Alt. Yeah, Control Shift I or Control Shift I. And that would allow you to open up the editor directly within the parts. And here, if I wanted to utilize the range tool, I could now just do range editing directly there within the Midi editor. So at that point, the range tool could be utilized in the in-place editor. And there's also just an icon that you could get if you right click and go to track control settings, and you'll see edit in place. So if we just add that icon, it'll now become visible, and you could go to in place editing. So, and this is helpful sometimes if you wanted to copy like a particular, let's say I wanted to copy this entire measure, but it didn't start necessarily on beat. So let's say I wanted to come here. And if I choose to select the notes and duplicate, often you get this. But what I wanted to do was to actually select the range. So now when we select just with the range tool, I can just select like the range and then duplicate the range and have this silence kind of at the beginning and at the end and kind of keep the same time relationships. So there isn't a range tool in the editor, but use the edit in place, and that should make it a little easier. All right, so I just see from Danny Ketting, how do I get the transport stop button to return to 0? Okay, so as we play this, if I just hit the period key on a numeric keypad, you could do that. So like a lot of times I use the 0 key for stop on a numeric keypad, the enter key for play. So if I stop, it'll go back to where we were. If I hit the period key on a numeric keypad, it will just take us directly back to 0. So even if now our play position is, let's say here, I could hit, so we see we're at 33, measure 33, beat 4-1. Now I hit the period key, we're right back to 0. So we see, okay, I think this is the continuation of the Very Audio question. Hi, using Very Audio, is there a way to move the detected slices of my loaded audio only to notes of the defined key of the project? So there isn't a way to do that, but you can use the colors to help you get there. So it's not like turn it on. And a lot of times with Very Audio editing, it seems like it's a really good thing to do, but a lot of times with Very Audio, it's not that people, we often hear the term people sing out of key, when it really means that people are singing out of tune, and that could be different. So let's say I have my piano part here, and what I want to do is to come up with a chord. So I'm going to come up with the chord progression here, extracted from a piano part, or just and create a chord track based on that. So I'm going to go to my project menu to chord track, and we'll say create chord symbols. All right, so our chord symbols are created here. So now when I go into Very Audio editing, it will still kind of come over here, and we could choose to colorize based on the chord track. So I could see that if we have these notes, we'll see a couple of different note colors here. So we see red, green, and kind of this blue, kind of like an aqua blue. And the red is out of key. the blue, this shade means that it's in key, and these mean that it's within the chord. So this is pretty typical where someone's like singing slightly out of tune, but they're not out of key per se. So we could just kind of select these notes and just, nudge them in tune. So, use the color schemes from within Very Audio, and then you could have access to determine quickly what is in key, what's in the chord, and if it's completely out of key, you could just adjust it. Question: Are there resources for mixing in 5.1 without a 5.1 speaker setup? Probably nothing that won't lie to you. I mean, there's always different technologies that are trying to simulate that, but nothing that would be so highly accurate as opposed to having like a 5.1 speaker setup. So some people will just I've seen a lot of people fake stuff in a pinch where, they'll just kind of feed the surrounds a little bit, but it's probably a bad idea. So I would just spring for the 5.1 setup. Okay. So we see from Tame, project logical editor or macro to add group channel to selected tracks and add in a folder and a folder name and group channel name being the same, like a macro is there, but it doesn't change the folder name. So I don't think, to initiate some of the naming stuff, you may have to hit some of the key commands. Some of it might be where you have to double click to get a particular function in areas, like to rename tracks. So let me just see if there's a rename track key command to do this. I don't think there is, but I could be mistaken. Okay, there's a rename first selected track. So let's see if we can get that. Okay. All right, so I think there's already a macro for add to group track. And to, we just see if there's, okay, so if if the macro may depend upon a couple of different things. So let's say if I wanted to do this, so you may have to type the name twice. So if you wanted to come over here, so it may not automatically. So it may not automatically change it, but if you wanted to kind of expedite the process. So let's say I will do a new macro. So I go to my key commands. And we'll just call this Tanmay macro. All right, so we'll start with the macro that we had. So right. Okay, so let me add this. So I think if we do it to this track, we'll give it a shot. So let's fire off the macro. All right, so I'm just going to copy this and then paste. So that way the group track. So again, just to kind of do that macro, and you may have to go up more depending how many tracks that you want to, but try, this is kind of what I did. I used the kind of existing macro. So just go to my key commands, not to my profile manager, sorry. So we go to the key commands. I triggered the macro for these, and this comes standard with Cubase, selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. And then I typed the name and I just copied it, just using Control or Command C, and then navigate up, and edit and rename first selected track and then paste. So it's not too bad. I don't think you could incorporate the copy and paste in there, but you could experiment some more with that. So give that a try, Tanmay. Okay, so we have a question. When I change the tempo, the locators don't stay at the bar number and move forward or backward. How can I fix this? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a quick look. So let's say, all right. Okay, so let me just add a quick marker track. Okay, so let's say right now, this marker is starting here. So the marker tracks can, I think generally they can be in musical mode or... All right, let me take a look here. So I thought that they would go to that there was a setting for these to be, these could be in either musical mode or linear mode. So I thought there was a way to make this into linear mode or musical mode directly on. We just look in the track control settings here. Okay, so I think if we choose toggle time base, so right click and go to track control settings, and you'll see toggle time base. Let's add that. Okay, so now we've added this. We could put this into musical mode. So now as we adjust our tempo down, they will automatically stay at the right bar and beat. And if they're in linear mode, as I adjust the tempo, they will move based on that. So again, make sure that they're set to musical mode. So right click, go to track control settings. From hidden controls, make sure that you have the toggle time base indivisible, and then just make sure that you have that set to musical, and that should do the trick for you. Okay, we have a question. Is there a way to just reverse the changes in collective track height setting correct? Correct collective height is extremely flimsy for me, a reason I can't figure out. All right, so let's just try like a new project here. Okay, so let's say I have a number of tracks. So let's say if I just hold down, so we could adjust the height of one track at a time. I think if I hold down Control, we could adjust them all simultaneously just by dragging the bottom. If I wanted to do this for selected tracks, I could adjust, I think it's for just select, so that would do all of it. If I wanted to do shift, I could adjust just the selected tracks to make those bigger. So, try adjusting from, select these, and, you could adjust from the bottom. And, just be able to kind of resize selected tracks like that, or again, Control to do all tracks. So try using some of the modifiers like Command or Control, Alt, and Shift, and then you should be able to kind of adjust them and have a little more. You should have a better sense of what it's how it's going to be working out for you. Okay, so we have a question. How would you duplicate a MIDI note to the next grid value? Okay. Thank you for all the great questions from everyone. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. You can be notified of future Hangouts. Okay, so there's probably a couple ways to do this. So if you want to navigate to, let's say we have a couple of notes here. Okay, so let's say our grid value is set to eighth notes and you want to duplicate. So I think if you just select the note, you could just hit Control or Command D to duplicate to the next grid value. So, or if you wanted to take these two notes, you could also just duplicate to the next grid value. So just select the note and just hit Control or Command D. And then you could duplicate the note to the next grid value. Okay, my chat field just kind of jumped on me. Bear with me just for a second. Okay, just finding my... Okay. Okay, so okay, so I just see a comment from John Costigan. Hi, Greg. Isolating frequencies with your own track and fader using multiband compressor is the tip of the day for me. I use string bass, mini moog, and slap bass together, and now I can wrangle them. So it's good. Yeah, I'm glad you'll be on my list of people that gets a tip of the day where I feel good. So thanks for letting me know. Okay, just bear with me just for a second. Adjust my contact lens. Hang on. All right, so my contact lens is in place and I can see again, so that's helpful. All right, so we see from Byron Sawyer Sr. From Crystal Coast, North Carolina. I believe it's North Carolina. I'm not able to save to MP3, so really all you have to do is, depending on your version of Cubase, you could probably just come right over here, export audio mixdown, and you'll see file type. Instead of wave, you just want to choose MPEG-1 layer 3. So, and that will be your MP3 file. So in the audio mixdown, just again, go to file type and switch it from wave to MP3, MPEG layer 1, 3, MPEG 1 layer 3. So. I see a good point from Gareth that the legendary Michael Teams comes to the Hangouts as well. He's a regular attendee. We're proud to have him. All right. Okay. Let's see. We have a question from Tim Baker. Can you move parts of an audio file in the editor window and not move the whole file without hit markers? So let's show you how you do that. We could use like free warp for that. Okay, so let's just... Okay, so if you wanted to, let's say we're in our sample editor, you can go to the audio warp. So we'll click on audio warp here, and you could enable free warp. And at this point, you could just say, okay, I want to move. So I'm not adding, I'm just kind of adding different warp markers, but you can move parts here. So you could, often you want to make sure, like, if you didn't want it to move subsequent events, you could just click here, and then you could adjust kind of the position of your notes timing wise without having to do a lot of hit points. So give that a shot, Tim. Let me know if that works out. All right, we have a question: how to change the quick control defaults of specific plugins. In my case, SynthMaster 2, it doesn't show anything. It only shows CC1, CC2, CC3, etc. So it's really kind of up to the plugin developer what is kind of default quick controls, but not every plugin developer does that. So if you have kind of an instrument that you wanted to remap the quick controls to, let's say an instrument track, and let's say, okay, we'll go to prologue, and let's say I don't agree with the quick control choices. At this point, we can go to our quick controls, and you could choose to see any of the parameters here within the instrument. So you say, okay, Porto mode, and I wanted this to be pitch fine, whatever parameters that you want. Okay, I want to go to the panning of the amp effects. I wanted this to be mute. And then once this is done, you could just click here, go to your preset management, and you could just save a preset. So, and you could call this, SynthMaster 2. And you could store that within your template if you wanted to. So you could just kind of come over here. Okay, I want to see that. And now I just want to go to SynthMaster 2. So I see question: how's the compatibility with the Mac M1 chip coming along? Any date yet? I haven't heard of a date yet. It's a pretty big undertaking, as a lot of companies are going through. But I'll see if I could get some more information with that. But yeah, it'd be nice if, as you do a processor change, that it wouldn't be such a drastic change to all developers. Okay, so we have a question: how to set the control room in order to have one mix for the singer with headphones with reverb and a different one for the second headphone without it, for example. All right, so let me just jump back to project here. So once you go to so let's say we have our vocalist, and our vocalist wants reverb, but the bass player and drummer do not want reverb. So what you could do is select your headphone mix here, click on inserts, and then you'll see your vocals, and then each Q mix will have its own reverb. So you could just simply load up the Q mix, and that way the reverb is just on that particular Q mix and not on the bass or not on the drums, but just on the vocals. So that's how you do it. So we could have on the main section, we could have inserts. We could have inserts for the different monitors and for the different headphone mixes as well. So each headphone mix could have its own could have its own dedicated number of inserts and independent inserts. Okay, so just see macro to bounce a sample automatically when it's cut or sliced or snaked, maybe snapped. All right, so let me just add audio track here. So let's say I just have some quick loop of some kind to throw in. All right, so let's say if you just kind of come here, so let's say I cut, and now, if I wanted to select all the events, I'm not sure if the macro gets you much more than just kind of doing a key command for bounce in place. So, so check that out, see if it makes a difference, or if you just assign a key command for bounce in place or bounce selection. All right, good to see sub 403 on Hangout. Okay. All right, just got a text from my mom. She got her first vaccine shot today, so it's a relief today. Whew. All right, hope everyone else is able to get their vaccine shots. So question, is there a way to automatically enable sends when they are added instead of adding it and selecting enable for each send? So if I come here and if I just right click and add sends here, we could say I just want to, add effects channel to send one. At that point, it's going to automatically be turned on for you. And you could just... So you could turn it off or it'll be turned on. So that's a way that you could, so if you just kind of right click or on the particular effect send, so if you say add effects channel to selected tracks, I could just kind of come here and say, okay, I wanted to add my mono delay. I could just say add start. And that would add that to the particular track, and with it turned on. All right. All right, so I just see from J-Rock Nurse, I'm 66 years young. I still write and record rock and roll. Sometimes the stuff that you do is way over the top for me. So I'm just a dumb rock guy. So if I could do it, you could do it. And I'm even just a bassist. So. All right, so we see that Jazz Dude has a video on the Discord channel that he runs about Cubase running on an M1 under Rosetta. So Gareth, yes, you can steal my rhythm. So I guess maybe it was the beat I programmed earlier. So someone should do something with it. Okay. Okay, hi Greg. Is it possible to reverse only a selected region in the new sampler too? So if I wanted to do that, so I think it's going to be kind of the whole sample, but we'll go ahead and test it. So let's just go to sampler track. I'll drag it in. So let's say if I just do this and yeah, it's going to do the whole sample. But if you wanted to, what you could do is just select the region beforehand and just do a reverse like that. And now drag that into the sampler track. So the sampler track would reverse the entire sample, not just a portion of the sample. Okay. So to see a question, is the Scale Assistant work with the Very Audio 3? So the Scale Assistant is really limited to the Midi key editor. So you could determine the colors, but it's not going to automatically move stuff to the key. And a lot of times as I've mentioned, even earlier today, it's not necessarily that people are singing out of key, but it's that they're just kind of singing out of tune. So the scale creation may sound a bit unnatural for that. Okay, Gareth is reminding people to don't forget to like that Greg button. So I guess you can hit the like button. We're at 96 currently, so we need some more likes according to people. So, and Pablo wants everyone to smash it. And Gareth says I secretly get tickled every time somebody hits the like button. So that's good. I'm glad you're looking out for me, Gareth. Okay, let me just. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, how are you? I don't hear beats from my project. I'm using a headset from my computer. So, what you want to do, sometimes what you need to do is to tell Cubase where to output its audio. So if if you have it connected directly, like on a Mac, you would choose for your audio interface, built-in audio, and that could direct it to the headphones, but you may, depending which port it's connected to. So sometimes, audio cards, I see a lot of people that plug it into like the line input or the mic input on the back of the jack of the computer. So it's the wrong connection. So I see people do that. But once you have on a Windows, if you're using kind of the built-in audio interface, I think you'll see generic low latency ASIO. And then you may have to go into the control panel and tell it to output audio not from the speakers or not out of an HDMI port or display port, but directly out of your headphones within kind of your audio setup there. So make sure that you are telling Cubase where to output the audio so you could hear it on your headphones. So we see a question from Lars Muller. Are SoundToys 5 plugins working on Cubase 11? It only says 9.5 to 10.5 in their page. It's probably, I'm sure there's no real differences between 10.5 and 11. It could be just that it hasn't been updated since 11 has just come out recently towards the end of last year. Okay, so question from Tanmay. Why doesn't the video follow edit mode work with combined selection tool in my Cubase 10.5? So let's give it a shot. Okay, so I'll just open up a quick video window here. Okay, so I'm in combined mode and I will come right over here. So as I move the video, as I move my event here, I see that the video is updated when I'm in combined mode. So let's say if I'm here and I move my Midi note, that's working. You know, if I'm using the range selection tool, I can see kind of the range working as expected here. So I can see where the video is for the selected range. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you. I know you sent the video to me over the weekend and you didn't have the video working, but it seems like it's when I click here, it's jumping to the beginning of the selection, which you have in edit mode. But when I jump here, it'll jump directly to the selection at the beginning. So, you know, let me know what it's not doing, but that seems to be working as expected, where we see the video updating based on moving the events or just what the selection is. And as I move, let's say as I move the range here, so let's say I could see the video update frame by frame as I change the selection range as well. So I know the video you sent didn't have video in it, like, so I wasn't sure how the wasn't working for you, Tanmay. So question, Greg, in Groove Agent 4, once I've got 3 kits, do I have to drag those kits to 3 different tracks to work as one? So if you, let's say, I'll just go ahead and do a new project. Okay, I'm going to add 3 instrument tracks, a Groove Agent. Okay, so let's say I'll just load up some different Okay, just get this set up. Okay, so I have multiple kits here. So let's say I'll just call this Simon. And I think what you could do, let's say if we add just a MIDI track, you know, you have the 3 tracks probably already loaded here, but if you wanted to combine them, what you could do is just kind of come over here and let's turn this into my drum editor. So let's say I'll just so if I wanted to go through my different kits here, so let's say my instrument, just see if there's so if you wanted to, you could just say, I wanted the kick coming from, boom, boom one. And I wanted this side stick snare to come from Simon Phillips. And I wanted, my hi-hats, let's say, to come from, Cuts and Wishes. So I could have one track, but this one track is very annoying when I do that. But it's actually outputting to multiple different drum parts. So this one track could actually, access any of the different drum libraries just by switching the output there. So if you wanted to just have one part that could access your 3 different kits, you could do that quite easily. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to toggle show hide all used automation with one key command? All right, so let's go ahead and jump back to another project here. And activate this. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. Okay, so let me just open up some quick automation lanes. I'll do some brilliant automation. Bob Clearmountain is envious. Just kidding. Anyway, so. Okay, so let me just close. So I know you could do it from just the automation panel, where you could just say show used and do that. So let's see if we could do it from a key command. So we could say show all used automation. And you could hide all automation. So you could just say show used automation on selected track, show automation, show just all used automation. And so you could just set that up from different keyboard shortcuts, and you'll find that under the automation category. Okay, so I just see from sub 403, hi Greg, in the control room, there is the global inserts at the bottom, and there is the monitor inserts. Right now I'm working strictly on headphones. I'm using these inserts for different analyzers, and I need more than the 8 at the bottom. Can I use 2 different insert sections together? Thanks. So if you're doing like analysis stuff, you know, so you could use the two different inserts together if you're not switching. If you're doing it for analysis, you could use both of the monitor and kind of the global. So, you're going to have the monitor inserts. So you could see that in addition to the global inserts. So if you needed to have it, I'll give you 16. And then if you're switching between monitors, you could just have the same inserts loaded as monitors for your different monitors. So yeah, you can. All right, so see from Tanmay how to add multiple sound cards in Cubase. I have a Digi Piano sound card and have a separate sound card and want them to work congruently. So on the Mac, and this will add and compound latency, but what you could do is if you go to your Mac program and under Utilities, you'll have a utility called Audio Midi set up. So we'll just come right over here. So under Utilities, you can go to Audio Midi Setup. And then you could click on the plus sign here, and this will add you could create an aggregate device, and that you could then choose to run multiple interfaces together. The latency will be compounded when you do that. So some people tend not to use it. It's not could be sometimes lead to some instability, but you could do it just by, and then within your Cubase setup, what you would select is going to be under your studio setup, instead of your audio interface here, you would choose your aggregate device. And then you should be able to utilize both of the audio interfaces. Okay, so we have a question. Is there some kind of tab to transient function? So let's go ahead and I'll just revert this. So it's not using the tab key, but same exact functionality. So let's say if I wanted to go to my kick track here. So I'm just going to select the track, and I think it's Alt-N. So let's say if I am here in my timeline, I can hit Alt-N, and that will take me to the next transient. And Alt-B to go back. So, and depending where the transients are, so let's say if I'm just here and I go to hit points, I could adjust this threshold so it's a little more realistic. So now when I'm just here, and it's kind of, I just hit Alt-N or Option-N and Alt or Option-B for back. Next, Alt-Option-N, Alt-Option-B for back. All right, good to see Neurotic Nexus made the hangout. Good to see you there. All right, thanks for joining us. All right, reading through comments, I just see, great, thanks. You are an oasis of calm perched on a rim of a crucible. So I'm not sure if that's for me or someone else, but I think it's a compliment. Okay, just okay, we have a question. Greg, if I have a file in a pool that is in another directory, is there a way to quickly import it into the project directory so I can eliminate external references? So let's say if we go to our pool window and we'll select all of our audio, what you could do is just come here and there's going to be I think there's a conform files feature. It may not have. I'll just import an audio file here from another project. Okay, so I have another file there. So let's go to the pool window. Okay, so now that we've done the prepare archive, yeah, so just right click. So this is the file that we imported that was in a different folder. So right click and just choose prepare archive. And at that point, it will just take all the audio files that are used in the project and convert it directly to the project audio files folder. All right, Sub 403 wants people to hit the like button, so. See a comment from Jazz Dude that edit in place is a great tool for MIDI nerds, so it is. So. All right, so we have a question. When using the mouse to zoom in and out by holding the left mouse button on the timeline and move it up and down, why does the playback always jumps to the position? Is it an option? How to disable? So let me... All right, so... Okay, so let's say I'm zooming in. Okay, so make sure I get to, so when using the mouse to zoom in and out by holding the left mouse button on the timeline and move it up and down, why does the playback always jumps to the position? Well, I think as you do it, you know, what you do is the first click is actually, so there I'm zooming and it didn't jump, but when I let go, it's where the song position is as you zoom. So I could kind of zoom here. But what you do is you're actually kind of navigating based on the playhead as the reference point. But, you know, if you wanted to, you could just use like the G and H keys. But I think what you want to do is, you know, or if you wanted to behave a little differently, you could just use the zoom tool. And I think if you hold down Control, that way it could just zoom kind of independently. So if you just hold down Command or Control, you could click just on that and then double click to go back. So So, but this, as you're doing this, you're zooming kind of based on the playhead, because what you're doing is kind of zooming around the reference point of the playhead. So when you release, it will jump there. I think it makes sense. Hang on just 1 second. My son's knocking. Okay, sorry for the interruption. I'm back. All right, so we have Adonis checking in from Cyprus. Okay, so another question. Using plus minus from the numeric pad, excuse me, is stopping my playback in our DAW. Do not dare to name it. It works almost like scrubbing. Perhaps it's a preference. So if you want it to not interrupt playback, so let's just, I think we could just go to your preferences. So say we're playing along. And then I think it's under transport. Okay, so there's a preference here, stop playback while winding. So if that's checked, so now if I come here and I rewind, it stops and then I play. But with that preference unchecked, so again here, stop playback while winding, hit apply, hit OK. So I think that should do the trick for you. Okay, so a question. Hi, Greg. Question. Is there a command for exporting a comp into a new track? Let's say I record 6 takes of guitar, and then I pick a combination of those. How do I export my comp to a new track? All right, so let's go take a look. Okay, so there's a couple of different approaches for this. So let's say you have your comp done. So let's say we've come over here, we have our comp tool. What some people will do is say, okay, we've now have the most amazing comp of all time. And what a lot of people will do is just simply select the events and just do an audio bounce selection. And then that's automatically just replaced with a brand new audio file. And everything will be just kind of handled right there. So some people will, duplicate that particular folder, and, just in case, if you're at this point where it's like, okay, I may have to go back and change the comp. I've seen a lot of people will choose to just come here, duplicate the track, and then bounce this one. So say you do an audio to bounce selection, and then they could just simply right click and disable the track. And then if they need to go back and do edits, then everything will, all the processing, all the EQs will be identical. And if you need to go back and get back to the comp, you could hide the track. But if you ever need to get back to it, all the tracks are just a mouse click away. Sorry for hitting the mic. So you see a question from Tanmay. What do you use for backup and restore for Mac other than Time Machine? Because I'm going to do a fresh install of Viz and I want my plugins restored. So I haven't utilized any. I don't even use Time Machine for my Mac, so I may not be the best person to ask. Maybe other people in the discussion to comment on different backup systems for Mac OS that they've used. But I haven't utilized Time Machine. I'm just usually pretty careful and diligent about as I add new things, and I try to keep critical things on the cloud so I could, having my software being like on my work computer, all being on the e-licenser, I have no problem. I'm not worried about any authorizations for authorization schemes for other, other systems. So it's just really just reinstalling and starting fresh. So, but maybe you could check with users of the plugins that you're using for the authorization schemes that work better for those. So I just see a question. What's the Silvestri automation macros? I think I made a quick macro for Alan Silvestri, the film composer. Such a wonderful man. Just really always enjoy interacting and talking with him, and got to help him out right before Christmas. But I don't think it may have been just kind of something really simple that he needed reset. So let's see what's in. I can't remember. So sometimes I'll get, calls or emails from composers wanting a quick, how do I do this? Kind of like a Club Cubase, but I'll just get it via email or in, so let's see what it is. But I think what he wanted to do is he needed something to be able to edit the info line for particular values. And I think it was just, I forgot the exact, I could dig up some old emails and see exactly but it's just the command is to edit info line. But he's very particular with drawing in his automation points. He's like incredibly precise with his automation, and everything is perfectly automated so that it will play back exactly the same way every single time. And he, painstakingly writes that in for everything. So. All right, so let's just see a nice comment from Ali. Greg just wanted to say thank you and appreciate what you're doing for the community. So I'm glad to help. Okay, so we have a question. Can you show the macro for duplicating tracks without content? So I think that actually comes with the program. So duplicate selected tracks without data. So when we come to key commands, so it's just this. So it's project, duplicate tracks, automation, delete automation of selected tracks. And I think I may have added this one, delete inactive versions of selected tracks, because that came up with someone who I kind of made the macro for originally, and edit, select all on tracks, and edit, delete. So if I wanted to kind of take a particular project or file, track in a project, so at this point, if I wanted to edit, let's just go to the macro and duplicate selected tracks without data. It'll now just have the same exact, processing everything, but without any of the parts on it. All right, reading through more comments. All right, so we see Pablo's doing dinner. All right, so my chat field just jumped on me a little bit. Let's see if I can. Okay, so I think I'm okay. All right, so. Okay, so all right, just going to see Pablo's having broccoli soup. Okay, so I see a question. Hi, I'm trying to download Cubase 11, but it repeatedly gives me a failed network error. I've tried both download manager and browser. So, at first, we had tons of people that were using the download assistant, and and it was a bit overwhelmed. And I think it's hosted on like Amazon Web Services, so it's kind of spread throughout the whole world. But I would check just out of curiosity to see if you have, make sure that your time on your computer is correct. And if you still have issues, I have it on kind of a personal server that I could share a link to you. So you could also email me as well at clubcubase at steinberg.de. All right. All right. So we have Martin from Germany checking in. Thanks for joining us. All right. So I see in my older version of Cubase, you could hit the stop button twice and it would take you back to 0. What happened to that? So I think that, so let's say if I start here and I stop, if you hit stop, the first stop with the space bar will take you back to what the preference has. Now, if you hit stop with the 0 key, that'll take you back to, you could have that preference also work. And this may also be contingent upon use video files edit mode. So let's say if I have a preference, there's a transport preference here. So we go to preferences, transport, and then there's a return to start position on stop. So if that's turned off, now when I hit play, it's going to stop right where it is. And this is just using the space bar. And it's going to continue where I stopped from. Now, if I use the 0 key in a numeric keypad, and if I hit it once, it stops right where it is. I hit it twice, it goes to return to the start position. So, but I think if you so it depends on where you start from, but hitting the period key on the numeric keypad, that's always kind of been a constant since Atari days. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to automate MIDI note length, like continuously changing the gate length in a vintage sequencer? All right, so if we wanted to, I'll just do a new project. There's a couple of different ways to maybe accomplish this. All right, so let me just maybe find a quick bass patch. All right, so let's say if I want to come up here, let me just see if I can find something a little more. Attack on it real quick. Okay, and I will just go to so let's say if I have this going on, sometimes you could do it within kind of the arpeggiator, but I'll just bypass this. Let me just put in some different notes. Through just a quick step entry. Okay, so I'll just put this into a quick loop. Okay, and I'll just put that into a quick. I think if we go to maybe to MIDI modifiers. Here we could, if you wanted to randomize different functions. So here you could also just kind of do length. And kind of use the mouse to change. So you could do stuff like that as well. And there's probably different MIDI inserts you could use. So if you wanted to take this and even do so, there's different. So, you can play around with some of those different aspects of it to kind of change. So, check out some of those options. All right. Hello. How can I change my project's BMP to Cubase, please? So I assume it's beats per minute. So, if you have, let's say, a project like this, if you kind of want to change the project's tempo. So let's say if I have something like this and I have, MIDI or audio, as long as they're all kind of set to musical mode in a pool and there's a tempo stamp. As soon as I just click on the tempo here, they will automatically just adjust. So I say 88 beats a minute, 144, 100, let's say 220, let's say 80. So once everything is for audios in musical mode and it has the original tempo, and you could also just select the events from the project window and select musical mode from the info bar here or directly from the pool window, they will automatically just kind of be, they'll just kind of be stuck to the tempo like glue and follow it. All right, so we see, hi, when using Vari Audio and you have an instance of the same sample and then you want different Vari Audio tunes, can you easily break out of the block to not duplicate changes? So once you're doing this, so, the underlying thing is, let's say if we have a Vari Audio and we're doing editing a pitch, and if we duplicate this file, so just right click, and we do duplications here. This is changing the original. These are, in fact, even though they're two separate tracks, it's the same audio file between them. So if you do, certain edits to this file, those edits are going to be applied into the other file because they are the same file. You may have it used multiple times, but Cubase is pretty smart in handling this, and there's a preference. And it's one of these preferences that often gets kind of turned off. Like Windows, don't show me this again, and you do it, and then you're like, where's that preference? Where is that preference? but it's on processing shared clips. You want to just say, you could have this selected to create new version. So go to editing, audio, create new version. And then for the secondary part, if you do an edit where it's going to, change the original file that's used in other places, it'll actually take that portion of the audio file, create a new, separate, distinct audio file that's different and independent from the original. So try just setting that preference under editing audio on processing shared clips to create new version. All right. All right. So I'm seeing well wishes to my mom who just got her vaccine during the hangout. So it's a big relief. She can visit more. So thanks for that, Gareth. All right. All right, so we see Stephen McCormack from near Buffalo, New York, who's looking forward to joining these hangouts more regularly. It's good to see you on a hangout, and we look forward to seeing you. All right, so I just see from Tanmay, is there a key command that signifies enter or OK? Just using the enter key does it, but it's not necessarily addressable directly through, like, as part of a macro. All right, so just saying, just wanted to see. Okay, so, if just saying kind of a question, maybe I misunderstood it about changing my project's BPM to Cubase, please. So if you could just enter the project tempo directly here. And that should do it. So if it's coming from a Midi file or something like that, you could, have the project, the tempo track automatically imported right there. But if I misunderstood, just let me know. All right, good to see that Pablo's back with us. He's probably been back for an hour now. All right. Hi, Greg. Could you show how to do some basic vocal harmonies, doubling? I have trouble using things like RoomWorks effectively. So, a lot of times, let's say, if we wanted to do like just quick vocal stuff to kind of thicken it up, so we'll just take a look, jump over to this project. And in this project, let's say I'll just revert it to start from scratch. Okay, so I have just a vocal. So here I'm just running a basic, reverb as a send. Just a reverence. So if I wanted to turn that off. So, just like the LA Studio, the default preset tends to work really well. For other plugins, like, one that's a lot of people don't utilize. that could do like really nice things is one under modulation. If you come over here, maybe it's not under modulation. Let me just. Let me just find this quick plugin. That was under modulation, but it could be wrong. Just having a brain cramp on the name of it, but cloner, there it is. Okay. So this can also do some like really nice, thickening up of vocals. So let's say I'll just come here. So just kind of, we'll turn this on now.
How can I feel you? How can I see
Like for like a little bit of kind of chorusing effects. For background vocals, really nice. But if I wanted to do harmonies, let's say I just will take this and I'm going to extract the chords directly from the chord track. So I'll go to my project and let's say create chord symbols. And at this point, we have that. So we know what the chords are, and I could take just little portions. And I could just take, and once I know what the chords are, I'm going to just select that particular range here, and I'll just turn off. And I'm going to just select that range and go to audio to generate harmony voices. And I'll say, give me 3 harmony voices. And I'm just going to bring these down in volume ever so slightly to give them a little better context. So, just selecting just a little part and then just, doing like little harmonies here and there can make a big difference in the vocals. So give those things a try. And that should help out. All right. So we have Bulgaria checking out from Nikolai. All right. I just see from Jazz Dude says Steinberg made a 3-month trial of everything packaged last summer due to the COVID situation and stayed home. Attitude, Greg, any chance that they could repeat it soon? It'd be a great idea. I'll pass it along. So, but yeah, they probably didn't think that people at this point in time would still be at home from COVID. So, but I'll definitely kind of pass that along to marketing. All right. So we have someone from Greece checking in. All right. Okay. See, Michael Teams is headed off to Dallas. All right. So I just see, I guess I should clarify the only options I'm giving when exporting is WAV and AIF, no option for MP3 or anything else. How did I lose it? I had it before upgrade to 11. Let me know which exact version that you're running, Brian. That would be helpful. So if, I'm not sure if you're running Elements or AI or Pro. So so I see a question: does Steinberg have an orchestral percussion library? Is Halley Symphonic Orchestra going to get an update? So I think the Halley Symphonic Orchestra will kind of stay its own library, but there is updates. There's, like 2 years ago, there's a big orchestral library called Iconica. And that has extensive percussion libraries as well. So if you wanted to just go to your instrument rack here, so I'll just go to a quick Halley Sonic SE. And if you want to go to like Iconica ensembles, there's, full, let me just go to even the sections and players. There's full orchestral stuff. So we could have, chromatic percussion as well as drum and percussion. So if you wanted to have, I'll just go to maybe to the ensembles, and so your percussion map. And now you could definitely kind of check out the Iconica, and there's all sorts of, and I think it's 130 gigs of, orchestral stuff. So, and it definitely includes orchestral percussion stuff. All right, so I just see metronomic cinema question mark. So let me just take a look. I think it's one of the loop libraries. I don't think it's one of the instrument groups. But so I think it's a loop library. So maybe if there's a particular question on it, let us know. All right, reading through some more questions. Okay, so we see hi Greg, salutes from Barcelona. I would like to know if there is a way to automate metronomes so it could be turned on when there are no drums so the guitar player doesn't lose tempo. Thank you. What you could do is, let's say if we have a project here, and I have, let's say, my left and right locators set around, and when the drums drop off, you want the metronome to come in. So I set the left and right locators around. Just go to your project menu, And under signature track, you'll see render audio click between left and right locators. This is now created just an audio click track. The click track has an audio file, so you could just come here and say, okay, I wanted to take, this part out. So let's just delete that. And now the drums come back in right here. And, this is a section that the drums leave. So you have just nothing. And then the drums, like the drums drop out and the guitar player needs a click. You could just have it as an audio file and have the click kind of show up wherever you want. So again, just set the left and right locators like for the project or just a section. Go to your project menu to signature track and just choose to render audio click between locators. And it's an audio file that you could move around, mute, unmute, automate just that easily. So it says, now I draw the notes in the drum editor as if it was a metronome. You can still do that if you get paid by the hour, but that's probably the rendering the click track's a little easier. Okay. All right. So what about just orchestral percussion? I don't have Iconica money right now. So now it's going to be a full orchestral library. So the orchestral percussion isn't sold separately. All right, so I see Gareth is saying hi to Ryan. So I think he's doing well with some Legos. And he was telling me about his school lessons for the afternoon. Okay. Okay, so I see where are custom quantization presets stored. So I believe that they just go into a presets folder. So let's come over here, and this could be slightly different on Mac or PC. So if I wanted to go here, and it may be stored in the library on the Mac. So let's come over here. So let's go to Cubase 11. And then I think there's going to be a presets folder. Just see if it's in here. Yeah, I may have to dig it up. It may be stored in an XML file, but if you want to email me at Club Cubase, it's steinberg.de. Be happy to go over that. To see Steinberg should give free updates in chat. So you can have my wallet too. Just kidding. Anyway. Okay, my timeline just focused on me. Bear with me when I scroll back. Okay, going through. Okay, so we see a lot of people like duplicating comp track before bouncing. So that's a good tip that John Costigan's liked. All right, so I just see we need a better sample browser. I think the Media Bay works quite well for, doing sample browsing. So if you wanted to, be able to sample browse, a lot of people, want to come over here and let's go to your file browser and, look through any of your files that are in your, particular folder. You could do that as well. So you could right click and store favorite locations to add to favorites that could be immediately accessible. So there's a lot of people I know that tend not to utilize the sample browser so well, but it's pretty fast and we have lots of people that, really like it. You could have it automatically, in time sync to it, so lots of great stuff. So I don't think it seems very XP to me. Okay, question, are tempo track imports not available to MIDI files, only XML? So you can import to tempo. You could import tempo tracks from MIDI files, so you could definitely do that. It could be that by default, when you go to preferences, let's say we go to MIDI file, MIDI to MIDI file, that it could be not checked by default. So I think the ignore master track events on merge is checked. So just try unchecking that, and that should allow you to have the tempo information from standard MIDI files automatically carried over for you. All right, so see start of a little Apple, Mac, and PC binary fight. Okay. Okay, so I know we had a couple of questions that were mailed in advance, so let's take a look at some of those before it gets too late. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, so we had a question about, is it possible to create a macro to quickly undo and redo a recording? And then I think I answered this via email. So let's say if I wanted to just do a quick audio recording here, and one of the record modes that we're going to have for audio is, in under the records is going to be re-record. So as soon as I wanted to hit record, and the question was like how to, instead of having to go back to the same spot and do record and do the whole thing over and over again, those 4 steps when you're tracking. So what re-record allows you to do, and we could enable this from our record modes or directly from your transport menu, is let's say I'm recording here and I just punch in and there's a false take. I hit the record button again and it just starts up, and it could include the pre-roll for you. So right now it's kind of waiting for the pre-roll to go, and that's, all you have to do is just simply hit the record button again. So as you do this, just hit the record button and say, oh, we screwed up. Hit the record button again, and that will automatically take you back, erase the take, and allow you to automatically have those particular files just replaced in the same time. So, and I'm not sure if this question was from Jay or not that was sent in. Can you tell us how to change the color of the text in the chord editing panel on the left. So let's go to a quick chord track. I think we may have a chord track already in the project. So it seems like the text here is so I don't know of a way to kind of change the text color, if that's what you mean directly there. So I think it's kind of, I'm not sure if it's changeable or if it's been changed, but I think I don't know of a way to change that. Okay, so we had a question: how do you recover original files after they've been processed by direct line processing? And it's replaced with a new version. All right, so let's just do a quick new project. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come here and I just wanted to I look in my pool window. Let me just do a new project so I can know exactly where I'm saving it to. So I'm just going to say, okay, so we'll do it January 5th, 2021. So I think we'll be okay. So as soon as I have my audio in this particular folder and I do a processing, so say I just do an offline process and I just want to do an envelope for that. Okay, so, and let's say a normalize. Okay, and let's do just a reverse. Okay, so now where is the original file that's stored? Where is that? So what you need to do is, as soon as we do offline processing, and we'll go here to our particular folder. So let's say I go to my projects folder. And I think I have a Hangouts folder. Let's do January 5th. And we open this folder up. It's going to go, we'll see an edits folder. So I think the original file now is in the edits folder. So all the, so you have the audio folder, which is where the audio files are. And then you're going to have the edits folder. And the edits folder is where the original file gets placed to when you do direct offline processing. So it's going to be the edits folder, which is automatically created as we do a direct offline processing. Okay, so we have a question. Can you explain how it works and how to use parallel compression on a track? All right, so let me just... Parallel compression, a lot of people mistakenly call it New York compression, but I think it was actually developed by a guy that I met and have gotten to hang out with a number of times, named Bob Dennis, who was probably, I think, the first person I know that really used this particular trick. And he was the mastering engineer, kind of the heyday of Motown in Detroit. So he would do it a lot. And then a lot of people call it New York compression because they kind of, I think, stole it from him. But let me just go to this. So what it's going to allow you to do, and if you listen to like a lot of Motown recordings, there is that, you hear the bass really well on regardless of the system, and you hear the vocals really well, kind of regardless of how loud they are in the mix. They just kind of are omnipresent. So let's say so you could do this by kind of doing almost 2 stages of compression. So I will come over here and I'm just going to add 2 group tracks. So I will just right click here and let's add 2 groups, and I'm going to make them stereo groups. Then I'm going to go to my sends. Let's just select these particular tracks. I'll go to my sends, and I'm going to hold down Alt and Shift, and I want to send these all to group 1 and turn it on. And I want to send all of these to group 2 and turn that on. So what you want to do in kind of parallel processing is I'm sending my drums to 2 different destinations, let's say. So let me just come here. So we look at this, my drums are being routed directly to this group and this group. Now what I want to do is maybe leave the dynamics, natural dynamics in this one, but maybe in this one, I want to actually just apply a pretty heavy-handed compression. And what I want to do is for my makeup gain, I'll just kind of crank it up a little bit here. So what this track is often doing is kind of retaining the original dynamics, and we're blending it with this one, which can give you more punch. So this one is more compressed and more punchy, and that's blended with the one that has more of the original dynamics, and you kind of find this sweet spot between the two of them. So that's kind of how you could do parallel compression. People use it on bass, on vocals, so a number of different things. Okay, so we had questions. I'm preparing to play live, and I plan to use Cubase while doing it. Maybe I should start asking if Cubase is suitable for live performance. It definitely is. So I remember talking with Hans Zimmer for his live setup. You know, he was just like, yeah, Cubase was the 19th member of the band. You know, didn't make a mistake ever. It was great. You know, so playing the track back from Cubase while manually playing all MIDI instruments in Cubase live. Question I want to play with Steinberg VST instrument, and then later in the song switch to a third-party VST and also switch back again. So if you wanted to kind of set up, you know, Cubase for live use, you could set up like, you know, 2 instrument tracks. So let's say here I wanted to have retro log. And let's say, okay, I just wanted to come, let's find just like maybe a quick synth lead. All right, and let's set up another instrument here, and this could work kind of the same way. You know, I wanted this to be a Howling Sonic SE instrument, and let's make it okay. All right, so what a lot of people do is, you know, as they're kind of playing back their track, you know, they'll just sit here and, you know, and then go up to, and a lot of MIDI controllers, you could actually down to the, and you could just do that. So people will just kind of switch between different tracks, or switch between the different tracks, and from a MIDI controller switch between MIDI channel 1, MIDI channel 2, and be able to switch kind of just like that. So lots of people use Cubase live. Okay, so we had a question, and I think I responded by email, but just for the benefit of the group, when I import a loop or sample from the media bay to the project, Cubase automatically sets the level of the channel fader accordingly to the level of the preview and media bay. Is it possible to do the same thing, but using the gain of the pre in the channel strip? So, currently not. And I think, as I discussed kind of in the email, I think that could be really confusing for a lot of people, not realizing where the gain change was. But I'll pass it on as a comment. All right, so question. Hi, I can't find the cycle marker name or the cycle marker ID attributes in Nuendo 11 name system dialog box. Are they no longer included in the new version? Nuendo 10.5 still included these. It's important to know because I use these every day, and if I miss them, I don't upgrade to the new version. So this works the same way in Cubase and Nuendo, so we'll just kind of show you. So let me just add a quick marker track. And let's add a couple of cycle markers. Okay, so when we go to the export audio dialog box, we go to the naming scheme. We don't see cycle marker naming schemes until the cycle markers naming option is selected. So once we do that, then we see the cycle markers name, the cycle marker ID become visible. So, but if we just have the locators selected, then they're not visible because there's no cycle marker attribute to be included. So now they are visible once the cycle markers are enabled. Okay, let's go back to live chat. We have a couple minutes before we wrap up. Thank you all for the wonderful questions. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. And make sure that also you hit the thumbs up button so we can continue to offer these Hangouts. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, reading through. Seeing different design philosophy discussions. Okay, still reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question. When I add pitch correct to a track, I'm getting 40 milliseconds of latency. How to change it? So, some of the plugins, as you add them in, will incur latency. So, for the pitch correct plugin to work on input, it probably will, by the time it figures out what audio is coming in and is able to do pitch correction to that, it's going to take a little bit of processing time. So, it's just a lot of plugins will have fixed latency. So, but when you play back tracks, they're not going to have that latency. That'll be compensated for. So you may notice it only on real-time recording. So. So hi, is there another way to monitor a plugged-in guitar apart from the monitor button next to the activate record button, maybe in control room? I guess you could have an external input. So if you wanted to come here, let's say in your audio connections and go to control room and add an external input. So let's just call it, guitar. And you just wanted to connect that, you could go to your control room and go to external inputs and just activate the guitar. Now you could say, I wanted to go to my external input of guitar or iPad, let's say, or I wanted to listen to my mix, and you could just have that configured just there. So try an external input. So how do I force a sample to play at my track's tempo? Sometimes manually stretching doesn't work. So you want to make sure that the sample has an actual timestamp, or tempo stamp on the sample. So when you drop in a sample, when you often see like the names of different samples here, usually kind of in the name of the file may have the BPM of the sample. So if the program doesn't know what the origin tempo is, it's really hard to figure out. It's really hard for it to stretch. Now you could do some other things where you could say, I listened to this and let's say this is 4 beats long. You could go to beat calculator and say, okay, it's 4 beats long, or let's say this is 16 beats. And it'll give you kind of a tempo here. So it'll say, okay, that's 50 BPM. And if you wanted to, you could just embed that BPM directly in the pool window. You could just have that particular BPM and change that there. Then once you have that BPM, put it into musical mode, then it will fit. Okay, with that, we're just about out of time. I don't want to lose my closed captioning. So we'll be doing it again on Friday afternoon at the Club Cubase Hangout. So you could send it to messages to Club Cubase at steinberg.de. And we could also, I want everyone to stay safe and healthy. And we'll see everyone on Friday. So we'll take care and everyone have a great day. Goodbye.